18 rounds into the season, we have 4-week gap to the Easter race, so let's have a recap of what's been happening, where I think things are going. And I want to start off with Red Bull. And honestly, if what Horner said recently is true, I think we all owe Checo an apology. Because it wasn't as much that he was just suddenly mid, it was just the car that taken a wrong direction there, and Red Bull weren't listening to him because Max was able to drive around the problems and he kept winning. Well, okay, Checo was a bit mid at times, he was involved in quite a few incidents at times, but his poorer form did start in Spain 2023, which is where Red Bull have pinpointed as the point where they brought the upgrade that started them heading on up shit creek without the paddle. And well, they didn't listen to Checo's complaints. They were kind of just, honestly, they kind of handed him to the wolves a little bit. And by wolves, I mean social media. And just the media in general. Everybody was crucifying him because everyone just thought he was suddenly mid, and it wasn't quite that simple, it seems like. Honestly, Red Bull's downfall toward one way needs to be studied. It really does. They are apparently bringing upgrades to Austin, which is going to be crucial for them in terms of the rest of their season. They're going to want to try and go back up to McLaren in terms of performance. I'll speak about the championships in a minute, but Austin's going to be big for Red Bull. If these upgrades don't work, and or if they just take a worse turn, or if they do nothing, that might make them be under a little bit more pressure than they would like to be for the Drivers' Championship, maybe. And, you know, in the prospect of maybe trying to catch back up to the McLaren and the Constructors. But if they do work, then, you know, maybe they can be a little bit more comfortable with the Drivers' Championship, and they can, you know, maybe think about closing back up to McLaren and the Constructors, which I don't think that'll happen, but I'll speak about that in a minute. They are no longer the dominant team. That has been evident for a while now. Is very evident. Now, there's a graphic that came up during the Singapore weekend where they were like the third fastest team on there, which is, no one would have expected that at the start of the season. But they're in this position now where it's looking like they won't win the Constructors and Drivers' Championship. Well, the gap is 52 points between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, with 6 Grand Prix and 3 sprints left in this season. It would have been 51 points if Daniel Ricciardo didn't get that that fastest lap in Singapore, which, very clever, Red Bull family. Very clever of you. An interesting tactic, using the junior team to try and take points off McLaren, but it's one of the things where the FIA hasn't said, I mean, unless the FIA say it's not allowed, then all fair game. It's an interesting tactic. There's going to be people not happy with that, but very well played. But it does mean, crucially, that Max can finish every single Grand Prix and every single sprint in second place and still win the championship, even if Norris wins every sprint and wins every Grand Prix with the fastest lap. Norris would lose it by 1 point. It does put Verstappen in a slightly better position in the Drivers' Championship. I do still think he will hold on to it. For me, the more interesting thing at the sharp end is 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And that's the biggest risk area of position changes. Between Lando Norris, between Charles Leclerc, between Oscar Piastri. Leclerc and Piastri, I think, is the bigger chance of changing positions, because McLaren, you know, they have the best car. Oscar Piastri, he seems to be getting better and better. Well, Leclerc, you cannot count him out either. You know, 15 of the 18 races he's finished in the points this season, all 15 of those point scores have been top 5 finishes. And again, yeah, all of this is not taking DNF into account. If Verstappen has a DNF, it could change everything. If Norris has a DNF, then that brings Leclerc right into contention, and Piastri as well for 2nd in the championship. There can easily be a lot of position changes there. Top 4 at the end of the season, I cannot help but feel like, even though there's a chance of position changes, and I'm sure there could be, I can't help but feel like it's gonna be, at the end of the season, the same top 4 as we have now. Verstappen P1, Norris P2, Leclerc P3, then Piastri P4. I can't help but feel like that's the order it's gonna be in. The Constructors, meanwhile, it's an interesting beast, honestly. It's interesting at the moment, because the way it looks now, and going off of, you know, recent performances, it looks like McLaren will probably win it without much challenge. If you just go off of Singapore alone, then you think, oh, you know, no one's going to challenge them. But the thing about Singapore is, honestly, I think there was only one driver that could have challenged Norris or put him under pressure in Singapore, and that was Leclerc. But of course, all that went out the window when Q3 went all pear-shaped for Ferrari. Look, I don't think it'll be a not much contest for the Constructors' Championship. I do still think McLaren will win it, But I do think we will see either Red Bull or on an outside chance now Ferrari, putting them under a bit of pressure. I do say outside chance for Ferrari, they are quite a bit more off of P1 than what Red Bull are, but it's the thing where you cannot count it out of Ferrari putting them under pressure, but it is a little more unlikely unless something, you know, big happens like DNFs or whatever. But again, the interesting thing here is P2. Will it be Red Bull? Will it be Ferrari? A lot of this will be dependent on Red Bull's upgrades they're bringing to Singapore, Austin, not Singapore, we just had Singapore. What they do for them, you know, how can Ferrari fare over the last few races of the season? As I say, I don't expect anybody to be passing McLaren at this point in the constructors. I really don't, because they have the car to win it. They have the drivers to win it. Honestly, they do have the strongest driver lineup in F1 at the moment. Whereas that all changes next year when Lewis Hamilton makes his way over to Ferrari. That'll change. But honestly, McLaren, if they don't win the constructors at this point, then they seriously have to ask themselves what went wrong. But I don't think it'll be an easy ride for them to their first Constructors' Championship since 1998. I think there will be a bit of pressure put on them, but I think it's going to be McLaren P1, Ferrari P2, Red Bull P3. That's my predictions there. And also just a scary word on this McLaren front wing thing that came to light after Baku. All I'm going to say on it is that finding and exploiting loopholes like Yun, it is pair to the sport, it's pair to Formula One, it always has been and it always will be. That is a fact we all can. However, those loopholes that teams find and exploit, those being investigated, looked into and closed if they need to be, is also part of the sport. And that's all I'm saying on it. Also, by the way, just gonna throw it in there, be sure to subscribe for more Formula One content if you're enjoying this video. Drop a like if you're enjoying the video, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What are you thinking of how things are gonna go the rest of this season? But let's get back to it. And just a quick mention on Mercedes. I do not understand this team. I really do not understand them in terms of performance. Sometimes they are there, they are right there, but then sometimes they are not. And they're nowhere, or they're just kind of in no man's land, or they just don't... It makes no sense, this team. Honestly, absolutely none whatsoever. At one point you were thinking, oh, they maybe could have challenged, you know, for a third in the championship. They maybe, you know, like the run when they won 3 out of 4 races in the middle of the season. I mean, maybe they could have challenged for second, but now they're locked onto 4th unless something big happens. But elsewhere, do not discount the battle for 6th place in the Constructors. Do not sleep on it, because that's gonna be good to keep an eye on. You have RB in 6th right now on 34 points. You have Haas now on 31 points after they scored some good points in the last couple of races. You have Williams on 16 points now after they scored 10 points in Baku. Honestly, that one's gonna be so interesting to keep an eye on. And that's, you know, that's prize money. The positions in the Constructors, full small teams, the Constructors is what really matters for them, because, you know, points mean prizes, higher positions in the Constructors mean prizes. You know, we're talking millions of dollars here. As I say, Haas have scored a couple of good points. They've scored in the last 2 consecutive races now. Hulk had a really good weekend in Austin, you know, and Singapore, not Austin. I'm getting my races mixed up. He had a good weekend there, and he has a Kevin alongside him with a clean license. But Kevin was, as someone said over the Singapore weekend, a Kevin Magnussen on 10 penalty points was threat enough. A Kevin Magnussen who really has nothing to lose and a clean license. I mean, if that's not something to be a little bit worried about, then I don't know what is. And of course, you also have, you know, Williams. They've got Franco Colapinto now, which he's been really, really good. I honestly, when Colapinto was first announced, I was baffled by the choice. And realised that all he needed to do was not crash. But he's doing more than just not crashing. He's actually scoring really good points. Like, he scored good points in Baku. He was close to the points, rather, in Singapore. He's been doing really good in terms of performances, and it was a good decision from Williams, honestly. But then at RB, you have the prospect of a change before Austin. Daniel Ricciardo, that may have been his final race in Singapore. Maybe in his last Grand Prix, we might see Liam Lawson in the car for the final 6 races. What might that do for them? Will it help things? Will it not help things? But regardless of a prospect of a change there, I don't think RB will hold on to 6th. I think we're going to see Haas take 6th in the Constructors, and then 7th will be RB, then 8th will be Williams, and then Alpine and Sauber in 9th and 10th. And finally, the last 6 races of the season. What to Christ decided the scheduling of the final 6 races? Because they make absolutely zero sense. Like 4 weeks between Singapore and Kota, and then there's the Kota, Mexico, Brazil triple header, and then I originally thought it was a 2-week gap, a classic 2-week gap between Brazil and Las Vegas. It's not, it's actually a 3-week gap to Vegas, which is the start of a Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi triple header. Seriously, who decided that? It makes no sense. Like, can someone please make this make sense? Is that just how they decided to work it out to be best? Like, come back after the summer break for 4 races, then have basically another break the same length as the summer break, like have an autumn break, and then have a triple header, then have 3 weeks to another triple header. Triple headers are something that I think should only be done if it needs to be done, and honestly they're kind of unavoidable when you have a 24 race calendar. However, those 2 triple headers were both avoidable. You could have done 3 double headers instead, or if you insisted on having one of them as a triple header, leave USA, Mexico, Brazil as a triple header, and then just move Vegas 1 week earlier. That puts Vegas as a standalone. There are 2 weeks between Brazil and Vegas, and there'll be 2 weeks between Vegas and Qatar and Abu Dhabi, the final 2 races as a double header. That would make a lot more sense in my head, at least, you know, because it puts Vegas as a standalone, Vegas a race where they're racing in Pacific time zone on what, Japan time? I would have said Australia time, but well, that was at 4 AM UK, not 6 AM UK, and that's the time that Japan was, and that's the time that Vegas is. So you know what I mean. It just, whoever decided the scheduling for these final 6 races, make it make sense, because it doesn't make any. But now finally, let's hit a quick run through the championship standings. Let's see how it's all shaping up right now with 6 races left in the season. Max Verstappen is still your championship leader on 331 points. He has a 52-point gap back to Lando Norris in 2nd place on 279 points. Charles Leclerc is in 3rd place on 245 points. He has just an 8-point gap back to Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren car on 237 points. Rounding out the top 5 is Carlos Sainz on 190 points, while he has 16 points to Lewis Hamilton on 174, and then George Russell is in P7 on 155. Sergio Perez is in 8th on 144, then you have a bit of a gap back to Fernando Alonso on 62, and then Nico Hülkenberg rounds out the top 10 on 24. Lance Stroll is also on 24 points. Of course, Nico is ahead on countback. 22 points are going the way of Yuki Tsunoda, while Alexander Albon and Daniel Ricciardo are both on 12 points in 13th and 14th. Pierre Gasly has scored 8 points so far this season, while Oliver Behrman is on 7 points. The first driver in F1 history to score points with 2 different teams in a single season. Kevin Magnussen is on 6 points in 17th place, while 5 points go the way of Esteban Ocon in 18th place. The 9th and 4 points go the way of Franco Colapinto in 19th. He's the last of the point scorers, as Zhou Guanyu is in 20th on 0 points. Logan Sargent was binned after Zandvoort and he's on nothing, and Valtteri Bottas is 22nd in a 20-car championship. Then in the constructors, McLaren now lead the way. They lead the championship in the constructors on 516 points. The first time they've led the constructors in 10 years. Red Bull are in 2nd on 475, bit of a gap there. And then you have Ferrari on 441. Mercedes are kind of in no man's land on 329 points, while there's a massive gap back to Aston Martin, who are also kind of in no man's land on 86 points. 34 points go the way of RB, and then you have Haas on 31 points. Williams are on 16 points, 13 points going the way of Alpine, and then Sauber. Anyway, I'm gonna leave this one here. Let me know your thoughts as ever down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.